Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
And I'm Alex.
Hey, Alex, how's it going today?
It's going well. Another day to talk about fantasy news.
Gotta love it. With something that we love. Something that we don't love is up here in New York. There were some wildfire smoke that was very noticeable. Constantly smelled like campfires the last few days. We hope that Canada is able to get their wildfires under control and there's minimal damage to physical things as well as the environment. But we've been staying inside for the last few days, Alex.
Yeah, that's not fun. That's not fun at all.
Not at all. And as always, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, commenting on our podcast videos. Please subscribe to us on the socials. We are on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter with the handle at N2EFantasy. Alex, what do we have on today's show?
Today, we have DeAndre Hopkins news, and it's a team that we have talked about in the past just as wild speculation, but is not one of the teams that he's named. So that'll be fun to talk about. We have Dalvin Cook news. He finally got released, everybody, after all this talk. We have Dak Prescott potentially getting a new contract. We have Madden 24 cover athlete news. We have new gambling video release from the NFL. And it has a very prominent person featured in it. We have Russell Wilson trade rumors from last year. That's a very interesting wrinkle that we can discuss. We have Denver going after a former Kansas City player, so that'll be interesting. And Jeff and I break down our preliminary standings for the AFC teams by division. So we'll go through it. We'll say who we think is the worst, what their record's going to be. We go all the way through the best in each division and then figure out who the playoff teams are. So we'll talk about that. And of course, it's before camp even happens. So we'll have another one down the road as well. All right, Jeff, let's kick it off with some DeAndre Hopkins news. DeAndre Hopkins' first official visit is going to be the Tennessee Titans. That is a team that we speculated on just because they desperately need wide receiver help. Certainly doesn't have one of the quarterbacks that he's named, and certainly doesn't seem like one of the top teams to try to win a Super Bowl in. Jeff, what do you make of this visit? Do you think they get a contract done?
So I think, this is his first visit. I know there was rumored visits last week to New England and wherever else he was going, but this is actually his first official visit, which we know once you get a player into the building, you could sell them on your team. You could sell them on your culture. You could prevent them from leaving without signing a contract. So this is all great. What's also great is when I'm running my projections right now, there's almost a DeAndre Hopkins size hole in the Tennessee projections. So it would require minimal tinkering for me to be able to get this completed. But as you said, I don't think it's a top quarterback. I don't think they're a Super Bowl contender, which we'll get to a little bit later, as you had just mentioned. But if he wants to be wide receiver one, this is probably not a bad place to go.
Yeah, if he's going for stats and money and nightlife, then Nashville is a good move for him. If he's going to win a Super Bowl, I don't see it happening, man. They desperately need a wide receiver, so I could see them actually paying him what he wants. He's been known to enjoy the nightlife in his time in Houston. Don't think he got much of that in Arizona, so I think if he enjoys that kind of thing, he will like Nashville. I don't like the idea of him playing for a division rival for the Texans. I would rather have him on the Texans or on the Chiefs or Bills. So I think this is the first team to show major interest at this point, and he's just trying to get other teams interested and willing to pay up a little bit more. But we'll see, because he very well could sign there. It's the very first visit. They have the money to make it happen and the role. So I could see it happening at this point.
Absolutely. I think he's roughly got 6 weeks to be wined and dined. So we'll see if he decides to go on a second date with his first date. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, I know you're devastated that Dalvin Cook was released from Minnesota, and all the Alexander Madison truthers out there are going to be rejoicing. It's finally his time to shine. Do you think he can get the same kind of stats Dalvin Cook did? Do you think this was a good move? Where does he go? What do you think, Jeff?
So I don't believe that Alexander Madison is as good of a running back as Dalvin Cook is. If he was, they would have never offered Dalvin Cook that extension a few years ago, and they would have let him walk then and let Alexander Madison be the lead back at that point. But I also don't understand why Minnesota would make this move because I don't believe this makes their team better. Maybe that's not their goal this year, but at this point, June 8th, I think I'm looking to make my team better and not worse. And they made their team worse today. And as far as Alexander Madison goes, he's going to get the line of the carries here. So let's see here what happens with Alexander Madison, but I have him no better than a low end RB2.
Yeah, I don't think that they needed to release Dalvin Cook. I don't think the contract was that much of an impediment to their roster this year. It doesn't make them better. It doesn't make any sense to potentially have him available for a division rival. It seems to me that, Jeff, I know you think it doesn't happen, but it seems to me that a team that's been stuck with Kirk Cousins and has not been able to line up a potential young quarterback, they may want to make their roster conveniently worse to potentially try to get a higher draft pick. I wouldn't necessarily say tanking, but they got rid of Thielen, which everyone's like, okay, well, he's like 33 or something. That makes sense. And then they traded one of their better defensive players. And it's like, oh, you gave him away for like a 5th-round pick. And then now they released Dalvin Cook without even getting a trade done or anything like that. And not getting anyone of substance to come in to compete with Madison, who hasn't exactly lit it up. So I don't know how they don't look like a team that's getting better. They look like a team that's gotten worse over the last year. And last year, as you've pointed out numerous times, they had so many one-score wins, so many really close calls. I don't think that they can repeat that without getting better. So it doesn't look like they're going to be particularly good this year. And I don't buy Alexander Madison being an RB1. I agree with you. He's probably an RB2, just purely based off of the sheer volume that he's going to get. They could bring in a veteran to compete with him. That would be smart if that's what they're going for. But if they're tanking, they probably won't bring in anyone substantial. As far as where Cook goes, the teams that have been mentioned is Miami, who was the only team that would really push for a trade before the draft. There's the connection with his brother in Buffalo, although he's previously said that that's his brother's team and he wouldn't want to take the spotlight from him. So the only other teams named are like the Broncos, which I don't think is that great of a fit. I'm trying to think another team, maybe somewhere like, oh, I don't know, the Browns with Chubb. I know that's been thrown out there too. I would like him to go to Dallas because I think that would be kind of funny. But Jeff, where do you see Cook going?
Oh boy, there's a lot of teams here. Dallas, as you had mentioned, interesting. Miami's tied to because that's his hometown. Buffalo he's tied to because his brother's there. I don't really know where there's any like great fits. I know people are pitching Denver right now because they don't know what's going to happen with Javonte and his full recovery of his knee. And lastly, like, I know that we were just talking about this in our pregame conversation. What about Cleveland? Cleveland doesn't have a back anymore behind Chubb. And do we expect an older Chubb now to be able to take all of Hunt's carries and kind of just be the bell cow running back with having nothing behind him to spell him from time to time? And God forbid if Chubb ever got hurt, who is going to back him up? Jerome Ford? Don't hate that idea. And they are spending money because they looked at Hopkins. They still have some cap space. So I don't hate Cleveland at the end of the day.
Yeah, Nick Chubb is only 27, and I fully expect him to have top 5 running back year, maybe even top 3. If Cook comes in, that's going to be dampened quite a bit because Chubb went from getting ramped up and added to the passing game to all of a sudden, if Cook's there, that's all gone. I could also see a team like the Bengals doing that as well, bringing him in to go with Mixon because they don't have much behind Mixon. I could see a team like the Giants or the Raiders saying, "Oh, you guys haven't signed your franchise tags," like with Jacobs and Barkley. Hey, we're gonna bring in Dalvin Cook. He's gonna be cheaper than your franchise tag. We're gonna lock him up to a longer deal, and we're just going to revoke the tag. You see what you can get on the free market. So I could easily see those happen, and that's what I would do if I was the GM in that situation because I don't think Dalvin Cook is a significant downgrade to either Josh Jacobs or Barkley at this point. That'll be interesting. However, Dallas may not go after him because Dak Prescott is in line for a new deal, just like a lot of these other quarterbacks. Jeff, why don't you talk about what his cap is like in the near future and why Dallas needs to make a deal happen?
So Dallas needs to extend Dak Prescott this year because his cap hit right now is around 60 million. It's in the 59 millions range for 2024. So the longer that they wait to get this Prescott deal done is the more his cap number, his years, his dollar amount per year go up, because each time a quarterback signs, the next one typically surpasses it. So Dallas here, with their back against the wall with next year, looking at next year, they don't really have much of a choice but to re-sign Prescott to a new deal to lower his cap hit for 2024. If they don't do that, this is really going to hamstring them for next year. And they have like a bunch of defenders coming up, like Diggs and they have a whole bunch of people that they're paying right now. They'd have to let Pollard walk. Like they don't really have much flexibility or time. They need to really get this deal done pretty quickly.
Yep, I agree. It would benefit them greatly to get them locked down and get ahead of these other deals. In other quarterback news, Jeff, Madden 24 has announced their cover athlete, and I think a lot of people might already know this, but Josh Allen has officially become the cover athlete. So, are the Bills doomed this year, Jeff? That's my question.
They're totally doomed. The Madden curse is going to return after almost a 15-year absence at this point. Actually, I think it's more like a 10-year absence. I think the last year of the Madden curse was Peyton Hillis. Since then, there really hasn't been any issues with being on the Madden cover, but who knows? It could return with Josh Allen this year. I know we were talking offline about Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady when they were on it together 2 years ago now, because John Madden was on it last year after he had passed, that Tom Brady had the best statistical year of his career. And Mahomes also was right up there with the best statistical year, statistic of that year. I don't think it was even close to his best statistical year. But all I'm saying is the Madden curse is kind of dead. And I have Josh Allen in a dynasty league. So if he's able to repeat what Brady or Mahomes did 2 years ago, I would be more than happy with that.
See, I really wanted Aaron Rodgers to be on it, Jeff.
Did you know Aaron Rodgers has never been on the Madden cover?
I did not know that, but I just wanted the Jets to be cursed.
Did you also know the year that Brett Favre went to the Jets, he was on the Madden cover? And they had two different covers that year, because one was when they released it, he was in a Green Bay uniform, and they released a special Jets cover to go over that.
Well, I think they should have done the same thing for Aaron Rodgers.
They should
done
have
him the courtesy. He should have been on there. Josh Allen's a youngster. He's got plenty of time to be on there.
And I think if we go back and reread history a little bit, we would figure out that the reason Brett Favre was on that cover was because he had actually retired, and that's why he was in a Green Bay uniform. And then he unretired and was subsequently traded to the Jets. So I think he screwed up EA's plans that year, and I think EA said, not again this year, Mr. Rodgers.
Maybe. But man, we are just full of quarterback news today. Jeff, I hadn't actually heard this, so you'll have to break it down for me, but the NFL released new gambling video featuring a definitely retired Tom Brady. Tell me about that.
Is he definitely retired, or is this like another Brett Favre situation? Because we were just talking about Brett Favre. Like, is this where he gets us fully to buy in that he retired and then he comes back? Las Vegas may have a opening for him, but apparently teams are not doing a good enough job to tell players of the gambling rules. And the league kind of recognized this, and they asked Tom Brady to come in and actually like put together a video that they could show to all of the teams. Basically, he ends the video with, it's a privilege to play in the NFL, and it's not worth placing a bet on. So we'll see if that message sticks. But as we know, the player got released this week for the Colts. Not as big of a player as we thought it was. Isaiah Rodgers, defensive back for the Colts. He's got an impending suspension for betting on games, including Colts games. So he's going to probably get the big one, the indefinite suspension with at least a year. And hopefully this really sticks, because I think yesterday, right after the Isaiah Rodgers news, it came out that they're probing a whole nother group of players. So I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. I don't have a list of names. Even know what the universe of that looks like. It could be 5 players. It could be 50 players that they're looking at. So we will see what happens here with this gambling situation, but seems like a pretty easy solution to me, like clear cut and dry to me. But I know I'm sitting on the sidelines. Don't bet on the NFL ever, and don't bet in NFL locker rooms on anything else. I think the rest is fair game from everything that I've seen.
So what are the violations exactly? Are they like FanDuel, or are they actually like getting onto casinos and betting on games that way? Because if it's like FanDuel or DraftKings and they're like just doing their own league, I feel like that should be okay as long as they're not betting on outcomes of their own actual matchups.
Yeah, once they said he was betting on the Colts, I feel like he actually bet on the Colts to either win or lose the game. So,
Well, okay. Well, if you bet on your own team to win, I don't think you should be penalized for that. I think the only problem is when you bet on your team to lose, because
right.
then you could potentially be throwing it. But if you're betting on your team to win, that shows that you buy into your team and you're trying. So I don't think you should get penalized for that. It's weird. It's weird the way that they do it, and it's all because of Pete Rose. It's all his fault. And classic, what is it, White Sox? It's all their fault for throwing games.
But yeah, just to simplify it, if you're a member of the NFLPA, you cannot bet on anything NFL.
That's
And
dumb. That's dumb. That's so dumb.
I mean, but it's a privilege to be a football player. So if you don't want that privilege and you want to go bet, then go quit.
That's true.
But you'll have plenty of time after you retire to be able to bet on it.
We have more quarterback news. More quarterback news. Apparently, Russell Wilson, after demanding that his GM and coach get fired while he was in Seattle and getting turned down, then turned down a trade to Philadelphia before Philadelphia committed to Jalen Hurts. So Russell Wilson turned down going to a potential Super Bowl caliber team. They weren't good enough for him. And then he wanted to go to the Broncos, where he ultimately failed. And then Jalen Hurts lit it up this year and got a contract. So interesting times, Jeff. What do you make of the whole situation there?
I think Philly and Denver's roster going into last year were pretty comparable. So I think Russ, looking at everything else, is equal. I don't think he wanted to uproot his family from Seattle to the East Coast. So I think it kind of took the East Coast teams off of the map per se. And basically what that looks like is he wanted to be closer to Seattle, and that was probably due in part to family things. I could only assume, because why else would you not want to go to Philly? The only caveat that I'll give to that is if Philly had traded their first round pick from last year's draft, then they wouldn't have been able to acquire AJ Brown. So the team looks a little bit different without AJ Brown, because I do believe that he was a difference maker for Jalen Hurts this year. So that is one little caveat. Other than that, it does look like in hindsight, Russ made a big mistake. However, now Russ gets a second shot here with a legitimate Hall of Fame head coach. So maybe after year two, this looks a little bit different.
So to tag on to that, it sounds like, because I've heard that the city of Denver and the city of Seattle have a lot of similar lifestyle stuff, have similar culture. They're both also very pretty areas and stuff like that too. So I could see it being more appealing to move to the city of Denver. So ultimately, it just means that he hates all of Philadelphia. So Philadelphia fans, Russell Wilson hates you. Please note that whenever you face Denver.
Right? And you would think that Denver and Seattle are closer on the map than they actually are. They're quite a little hike away from each other.
Yeah.
I thought they were closer, but a little Google search told me otherwise, that it looks like it's a 20-hour drive.
Yeah, Seattle is pretty far from most teams.
Yeah. But living in the Northeast, I just assumed Denver was somewhere over in that area as well.
Yeah, well, you're used to having a whole bunch of stuff real close to you because it's a bunch of states all squished together. But, I live in one of those states that's very spread out in Texas, so I'm used to the more spread out nature of the rest of the entire country. But speaking about one of those Midwest teams, and also in the same division as the Broncos, Denver actually poached Kansas City's former player Frank Clark, because he was out there and they actually snagged him to bring a little pass rush to that defense to kind of get it to compete with teams like Kansas City and the Los Angeles Chargers. So a little sneaky move from Denver. Sean Payton is pulling off moves his first year up there. So we'll see if that can make a difference for them this season. It's always nice to occasionally talk about a defensive player on this podcast. Spice it up a bit. Add a little KC barbecue sauce to that Denver team.
Defensive players are players too.
That's right. Okay. Jeff, do you want to talk about our AFC record predictions?
So, being who I am, I created a spreadsheet where we had to actually nail down wins and losses for a team. So we actually went week by week. So we're not just pulling these numbers out of nowhere. These numbers are actually well calculated based on the wins and losses that we actually gave them, their schedule, looking at the weeks. And then once we came up with records, it was pretty easy to come up with playoff teams. And that's kind of where we're at.
All right. Do you want to start with yours? Or you want me to start with mine?
I can start with this one.
All right.
So for the AFC East, coming in at number 4 with a 4-13 record, the New England Patriots. Coming in at third place with a 7-10 record is the New York Jets. Now, before everyone jumps down me on this one, I do believe the Jets get off to a slow start and they do rebound later, but it's definitely far too late for them to be able to make a substantial run. Second place in the AFC East will go to the Miami Dolphins at 10-7. And first place in the AFC East are the Buffalo Bills at 12-5. Figure what's really interesting about the Bills is I have them starting off the year 8-0, and then they have 5 very tough road games in the second half of the year. And I really hope that doesn't shake their confidence for the playoffs, but I do have the Buffalo Bills as my division winner for the AFC East. Alex, what are your thoughts on the AFC East?
So 3 of mine are very, very similar, and one of them is reversed. So coming in fourth in that division with a 4-13 record is the New England Patriots. So we line up on that one pretty perfectly. Coming in third with a 10-7 record is the New York Jets. Coming in second is the Miami Dolphins with an 11-6 record. And coming in first place is Buffalo Bills with a 13-4 record. So I think the biggest potential mover in this division is Miami if something happens to Tua. Tua's health is going to determine how well that team does. I agree with you that the Jets are going to struggle in the first few weeks. However, I obviously have our records reversed. So I have a 10-7 and you have a 7-10. So I think we differ a little bit there. I just think that team does have a lot of talent, and now they have Aaron Rodgers, who should help that team get some wins. But it's a very tough AFC, so it's going to be interesting how all of this shakes out. And apparently, when we get to our playoff teams, we'll see if they line up too. So, do you want to start with the AFC North, or if you want to add anything about the AFC East before we move on? Go ahead.
Nothing to add about the AFC East because we're kind of like spot on in that division. So that feels very 1-4, kind of lock it in. But as you just mentioned, if Tua goes out, gives Jets a little bit of a leg up. And also, it probably wraps up the division a lot earlier for Buffalo.
Yeah.
So moving on to the AFC North, in fourth place, the Pittsburgh Steelers with a 9-8 record. So Mike Tomlin keeps his winning record alive, but no playoffs, and last place in a very, very, very tough division this year. This division actually improved a lot. Now, for my next 3 teams, I have them in a 3-way tie at 10-7, but I'm going to explain to you the order of these 10-7 teams. So coming in at third at a 10-7 record is the Cleveland Browns. They are third because they have the lowest opponent win percentage. So that will really affect their seeding for the playoffs, basically, in this situation. Second place, I have Baltimore Ravens. Win percentage is second lowest in the division, but also a 10-7 record. And then the division champs are going to be also 10-7, the Cincinnati Bengals, but with the highest win percentage. So I do have the Cincinnati Bengals taking this division.
So we're definitely going to have some disagreements on this one. I think the AFC North is the best AFC division this year. And I know a lot of people will think AFC East with Buffalo, Miami, New York, or you can think AFC West with Kansas City, Chargers, Broncos. I can understand that, but all 4 of these teams in the AFC North have a chance to make the playoffs this year. However, I disagree with the order, and I think the Cleveland Browns are the 4th team in this division. I had a very hard time with their standings and their record because I think they play a pretty tough schedule, and I don't quite buy into them yet, but I could see the potential for them to outperform my 6-11 record for them going into the season. It's June 8th when we're recording, and this is what I foresee before training camp hits. So let's take that with a grain of salt. At third, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers at 11-6. I think they had some of the biggest improvement in the entire league, and I think that they can turn the corner, and they're pretty good at playing smash mouth football. They also will have TJ Watt, hopefully healthy. All of my standings assume everyone's healthy, which is not a given. At number 2, so I also have a tie, and I have 2 teams that are 13-4. But at number 2, I have the Baltimore Ravens, 13-4. And number 1, I have the Cincinnati Bengals, 13-4. I think if Lamar Jackson stays healthy, that is a very dangerous team. Lamar has not stayed healthy at the end of the last several seasons. If he can stay healthy, that's a dangerous team that goes into the playoffs. He has more weapons than he's ever had. You have the Bengals who improved their offensive line. They still have Higgins. They kind of added a couple players in their defense. So these are improved teams. They're still good teams from last year moving on to this year. Either one of them could win the division. I have Cincy edging out Baltimore, but it's very close. Very close. Jeff, how do you feel about the our differences here on this division?
I think you're a little low on Cleveland, but I don't know if that's some Deshaun Watson hate or you just don't believe that they could do it. They definitely have the best running back in the division. They definitely have a quarterback that's in the conversation to be the best quarterback. Now their receiving weapons include Elijah Moore and Tillman that they drafted. I just think that Cleveland could put up some serious numbers this year.
Yeah, I might even Cleveland and Pittsburgh out a little bit closer to the season the next time we do the AFC. But right now, I don't see a lot from Cleveland that gets me excited. They do have a bunch of wide receivers, but they have a bunch of young guys with Amari Cooper. So I don't know if Elijah Moore is good yet. I would think that he'll be better with Cleveland than he was with the Jets. I don't know about the other young guys there. They don't have anyone behind Chubb, so if Chubb gets hurt, they're kind of screwed on the run game. They play in a very tough division. I don't know if they can get past some of these guys, but I could probably bump them up as we get closer to the season. Maybe 6-11 is a little low for them, but we can move on to the AFC South.
All right, let's give it a shot here. So coming in at number 4 and improving quite a bit is the Indianapolis Colts at 7-10. Now that might be a little bit of a shocker, but a lot of this depends on Anthony Richardson and his development and his ability to be able to lead an NFL football team right out of the gate. Number 3 would be the Houston Texans at 8-9. So they're going to get a big bump up here from last year. They're not going to finish with a top 2 pick again this year. Again, don't really have a reason to because they don't have their first round pick next year. A nice little improvement for them. If this does happen, then this would be enough to instill some confidence in Stroud and being able to move forward. Same thing with Indy with Richardson. If that record does happen, it's enough to give them confidence to move forward. Coming in at number 2 is the Tennessee Titans, and I know that's a team that we completely disagree in. I have them going 9-8, and I still believe that Mike Vrabel is one of the best coaches in the league. They still have Henry. Tannehill's now fully healthy. They missed the playoffs by 1 game with Josh Jacobs. They didn't really lose anything at wide receiver. They could gain Hopkins this weekend, but obviously this is without Nuke. And at number 1, winning the division is the Jacksonville Jaguars at 11-6. Now their schedule is a little bit harder than some because they do play back-to-back London games. Never been done in NFL history. We'll see if a team can do it, playing away from home 2 weeks in a row, because I'm assuming they're just going to stay in London for the entire week. But that could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. There could be a lot of sightseeing and such. So we're gonna see what that actually looks like for the first time ever. I did think Jacksonville was a team that could have moved to London at some point, and that's something that we didn't talk about. But they are looking at renovations for their stadium, so it does look like they're going to stay in Jacksonville for the long haul. But that's my division champs, Jacksonville Jaguars.
So mine is different for sure. I have at the 4th place Tennessee Titans at 3-14 record. So we're 6 games off from each other there. I think that they are not a very good team. I think they've gotten worse since last year, and everyone else has gotten better. I don't see them. I struggle to give them wins at all this season. I don't have high hopes for them. If they get Hopkins, that's improvement, and I'll give them a few more wins. I still don't think they can make the playoffs even with Hopkins, honestly. But yeah, so I have Tennessee at 4, and at 3, because I'm a pessimist, I have the Texans at number 3 with a 5-12 record. They have the worst division record out of their entire division with 1-5, whereas the Titans, 2 of their wins came from the division. So I don't have a lot of optimism that the Texans will make the playoffs this year, although I think the future is very bright. At number 2, I have the Colts also with a 5-12 record. However, I'm pretty sure I have them beating the Texans twice this year, both at home and away, which historically has happened. The Colts with the same record kind of edge out the Texans. I think with rookie quarterbacks, I think they're kind of on the same playing field there. And I think these are both 2 teams that have a better and brighter future than the Tennessee Titans have. And at first, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I have a higher record than you have. I have them at 13-4. I think I could potentially down the line put a couple of division games to someone else because I have them 6-0 in the division, and I don't think that that's fully likely. However, I don't see how the other teams can beat them at this moment. So that's kind of where I have those shaken out. So we had two in the same spot, Jeff, and we had two kind of flipped.
Yeah, but I do believe we agree on the division winner, and that's something. That is actually the only one that we have in the same spot, I believe.
No, I think we have Houston in the same spot.
You have Houston third?
3. Yeah.
Okay. But you just have Indy and
Yeah.
Tennessee swapped. Good times. But Indy doesn't have that great of a roster either. And I know you're giving them this upgrade with Anthony Richardson. So that's kind of the only thing I'll caution you there is their roster really wasn't that good last year. And they both kind of have similar strengths.
Their receivers is the second best group in the division too. And their running back is the best running back in the division. So their offense isn't that bad, and they just got an upgrade at quarterback on paper.
On paper. Greatest show on paper.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we get to move on to the last division, which I think is the best division this year. So coming in at 4 is the Las Vegas Raiders at 6-11. At number 3, we have the Denver Broncos at 10-7. So they'll rebound a bit, and I still don't like their postseason hopes either. But they're going to rebound a bit from last year. And new coach, quarterback, Russ actually picked it up at the end of last season after they let go of Hackett. So I expect him to continue that this year. So we will see what happens with that. At number 2, I have the Los Angeles Chargers at 11-6. And at number 1, shouldn't be a surprise, the reigning champs at 13-4, because they do have a mostly favorable schedule, and they will be my division champs for the AFC West. Alex, what about you?
Mine is a similar standing, different win-loss records, and mine's kind of interesting because I just realized it was reversible too. So I have at 4, I have the Las Vegas Raiders with a 1-16 record. So I think they're the worst team in the entire league, despite having Devontae Adams on their roster. They don't have, for me, and they don't have a quarterback yet. So I don't trust Jimmy G. He can get cut at any time because he failed his physical, and they don't really have much behind him. So I don't trust that team at all. Their defense is complete garbage. They're in a tough division. I don't see very many wins for them, and I really scratched my head and really tried very hard to find something for them. At 3, I have the Denver Broncos, and I initially had a higher record for them, but now I have 5-12 because I still don't know how they're going to get wins. I know they've improved. I don't know how much. Obviously, this was done without really factoring in Frank Clark, but I don't know how much that moves the needle for me. At 2, I have the Chargers with a 12-5 record. I may come down on that, but I think that they're a really good team, and I really like Kellen Moore, and they've made a lot of improvements on the offense. So I like them a lot. And I have Kansas City at number 1, and I have them going 16-1. So I have a 1-16, a 16-1, a 5-12, and a 12-5. So it just happened that way. I didn't plan it, but I thought that was interesting.
So you got Denver going 5-12 again. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I had them at like 8-9 or 9-8 when I first did it, and then tweaking it, they're all of a sudden had a 5-12 record.
That's what they were last year. So even with a moderate improvement, you kind of got them going the same. So we'll see what happens with that. All right. So who do you have for your 7 playoff teams? We already know your division winners. If you want to go over those really quickly, and then give me your wild cards.
So Kansas City at the 1 seed, Jacksonville's a division winner, Cincy's a division winner, Buffalo's a division winner, Baltimore is a wild card team, Miami's a wild card team, Los Angeles Chargers are a wild card team. So those are my 7.
So believe it or not, we match perfectly on this. I have Kansas City in the home field advantage. I have Buffalo in the 2 seed. I have Jacksonville in the 3 seed. I have Cincy in the 4. And then I go wild card 1 with the Chargers, wild card 2 with Baltimore, and wild card 3 with Miami. I think what that means, though, is week 1 we would open up with Buffalo and Miami, because 2 versus wild card 3 would be the normal order of events. We might get Buffalo, Miami round 1.
I think mine is just a hair different. I think I have Cincy at the 2nd spot.
Gotcha. So I would have Baltimore and Jacksonville as a matchup, and I would have Cincy and the Chargers as a matchup. That would be tasty right there.
I know. That would be very interesting.
I think there's like 5 teams that could easily win the Super Bowl in the AFC this year.
I think there's 7 teams that can win the Super Bowl, honestly, in the AFC. And that, for me, Pittsburgh narrowly missed the playoffs. So there's the AFC is loaded. The AFC is absolutely loaded. I would be shocked if an NFC team won unless AFC just beats itself up. So
Well, and this is why I don't hate with you having the Raiders at 1-16, because that means they would get a top 2 pick next year, and that means that they would keep the good quarterbacks out of the NFC. And as you can see, I'm a fan of an NFC team. Let's keep all the good quarterbacks out, with the exception of Bryce Young, and that's it.
yeah, I hate to break it to you, but 2 of my bottom 3 teams are in the NFC. So one of them is going to get a quarterback.
No.
Well, that was fun. Next week we can do the NFC side for you guys. But that does it for another episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you guys for downloading or listening to this episode. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment and share the show. Every little bit helps.
As always, you can find us with our handle at N2EFantasy on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Please give us a follow on all of those platforms. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
Bye, everybody.